All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are locked on Falcons. I'm your host, Aaron Freeman, and today I'm giving you my rapid reaction to the Falcons' 31-13 loss to the 49ers in Week 15.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So, guys, you know me. I'm Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Falcons for many years, formerly at FalcFans.com. RIP. Still going strong on Twitter at FalcFans. And, of course, the host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode, of course, is our rapid reaction podcast where I come to you guys a few hours after the Falcons Sunday loss to the San Francisco 49ers in Week 15 and give you my takeaways from this game, talking about the game summary for those of you that missed the game or just need to be reminded of the highlights and lowlights of the game. I'll be giving out grades to different phases of the game, talking about the offense, defense, and the special teams. Spoiler alert, offense and defense did not grade well, but special teams was great today. And then we'll get to sort of my big question of the game and sort of talking about what does this performance on Sunday, this disappointing performance, tell us about Arthur Smith's season as a whole, where you had sort of playoff implications coming into this game and the Falcons kind of laid an egg. And we'll get into all of that on today's episode. But before we do, I want to thank everyone that makes Locked On Falcons their first listen each and every day. And of course, Locked On Falcons is free and available on a variety of podcast platforms, including Apple, Odyssey, Google, and Spotify. And of course, now you can find Locked On Falcons free and available also on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel. Make sure you leave a comment. Make sure you give us a thumbs up and all that jazz. So getting into the game summary, things looked very promising for the Falcons today. The opening kickoff to Jermichael Hasty was a fumble. Quadrolison put a big hit on him. Richie Grant recovered the ball at the 49ers 12-yard line. The Falcons, 2 plays later, dialed up a non-lob pass in the red zone to Kyle Pitts for the first time seemingly this season. Got the ball down to the 1-yard line, and then Cordero Patterson took a pitch to the right side, scored on the very next play, but then the officials reviewed the play, ruled him down, although the broadcast did not show a single angle on the replay that seemed to indicate that they should have overturned the call. But apparently the folks in New York, or whatever the case may be, decided they must have seen something that caused them to overturn that initial touchdown ruling and spot the ball at the half-yard line. Then on 2nd and goal from that half-yard line, Falcons dialed up a play-action pass to Lee Smith, of all people. Of course, it was not completed. Then they ran another toss to Patterson off the right side. This time it was stuffed. And then on 4th and goal, the Falcons ran a speed out to Kyle Pitts, and it was off his fingertips, and the Falcons had a turnover on downs. And essentially, we don't have to necessarily go into the entire game summary because this drive pretty much embodied the Falcons' game and performance in a nutshell. You had 3 trips for the Falcons inside the red zone, inside the 49ers 10-yard line that stalled out on turnovers on downs. The team went 1 for 5 in the red zone in terms of converting those red zone trips into touchdowns. This first drive would also mark one of 3 drives that the Falcons started off in the 49ers territory, but only were able to get 3 points total on those 3 drives. But we'll talk more about that when we get to the special teams grade. After that goal line stop, the 49ers responded with a quick 3-and-out, and then punted it where the Falcons, again, got favorable field position starting at midfield. Mike Davis converted a 3rd-and-6 run. Then their next 3rd down pass to Russell Gage went off his fingertips, and the Falcons had to settle for a 48-yard field goal from Younghoe Koo to take a 3-0 lead. The 49ers then responded with a 11-play, 79-yard scoring drive where they got 2 big plays from George Kittle for a combined 53 yards, getting in the red zone, and then the Falcons defense was able to hold them there, forcing a 30-yard field goal to tie the game 3-3. Then at the start of the second quarter, the Falcons' next drive ended in an Arden Key sack. The 49ers started out their next drive with a 36-yard gain on a quick slant to Brandon Ayuk. 7 plays later, Kyle Juszczyk punched it in for a 6-yard scoring run, and that pushed the 49ers lead to 10-3 with about 9 minutes left in the first half. Falcons then on their subsequent drive got 3 third down conversions, 2 of which came on 49ers penalties, including a tough roughing the passer call on Arden Key on his second sack. of the game, and that penalty put the Falcons in the red zone, and Matt Ryan then finished that drive with a lob throw to Russell Gage, where he was able to climb the ladder over rookie corner Ambry Thomas to get a 20-yard touchdown catch, and that tied the game 10-10 with 4 minutes left in the half. And then Deebo Samuel got 30 yards on the opening play of the next 49ers possession, a defensive pass interference on Fabian Moreau on a third down, continued that drive, and then a few plays later, Samuel waltzed into the end zone on a 10-yard scoring run, and the Falcons dialed up a deep ball when they got the ball back with 33 seconds to Kyle Pitts against Thomas, but him and Matt Ryan weren't necessarily on the same page, and Pitts kind of went inside and kind of slowed down on his route, and Matt Ryan threw sort of outside, and it was nearly picked off by Thomas, but Pitts was there to help break it up along the sideline, and basically the Falcons were okay, no mas, and they ran the ball to go into halftime down 17-10, knowing that they would get the ball to start off in the second half and be able to tie the game. They did absolutely nothing with that opening possession. Matt Ryan was sacked on the first play by Samson Ebukam, and then 2 plays later was sacked again by Nick Bosa, this time fumbling. 49ers recover. Then on the next opening play of the 49ers drive, Jimmy Garoppolo fumbled the snap, but fortunately they got lucky, and Jeff Wilson was there to recover a 21-yard slant to Deebo Samuel, and then Wilson finished the drive with a 5-yard scoring run that pushed San Francisco's lead to 24-10. The Falcons dialed up a deep shot to Russell Gage, who beat the defender for a 21-yard gain on the next series. Then Matt Ryan, a couple plays later, hit Olamide Zaccheaus on a deep post for 49 yards. It was a great throw by Matt Ryan, and then they got the ball down to the 4-yard line, and then the drive stalled on second and third down. The Falcons wound up kicking a field goal, Koo hitting a 22-yarder, cutting 49ers lead to 24-13 with 6.5 minutes to go in the third quarter. And then after a third down conversion on a 15-yard catch by George Kittle, the 49ers were basically able to pound the ball down the Falcons' throat, running it 5 straight times for a combined 47 yards to get inside the Falcons' 10-yard line. Jawan Jennings was able to beat Darren Hall in a quick out for a 4-yard touchdown catch, giving the 49ers, the final score of the game with about 1:20 in the third quarter. And basically the Falcons couldn't do much with their next couple of possessions in the fourth quarter, responding with a 3-and-out to start the fourth quarter thanks to pressure on third down. Their next position was basically a 4-and-out, where the Falcons were able to get a 49-yard gain to Pitts, who beat Thomas again on a deep ball, but they couldn't convert that, going forward on 4th and 1 at the 49ers 8-yard line, and Patterson was stuffed on another toss play. And again, the Falcons refused to QB sneak in short yardage situations, and they paid for that. And then their third series, they were able to move the ball into 49ers territory from midfield thanks to a big punt return from Avery Williams to set them up there. And their ability to move the ball included converting a 3rd and 1 on a QB sneak at the 49ers 8-yard line. But then when they got in a 4th and 1 situation at the 1, a few plays later, the Falcons dialed up a crossing pattern to Christian Blake. The ball was high. Blake took his eyes off the ball basically because he was about to get obliterated by a defender. And the Falcons failed to convert another opportunity with just 5 minutes to go. And then, after the 49ers got the ball, they had 2 3-and-outs in between the start of the fourth quarter and this point in time. And they were finally able to find some success running out the clock on that final possession, taking most of the remaining 5 minutes off the clock before punting the ball back to the Falcons with 20 seconds left to go in the game. And then the Falcons gave Quadriolus his lone carry of the day. He gained 3 yards, and that was the end of the game. So a very disappointing finish after a very fast start for the Falcons. We'll talk about some of the things that went wrong when we give out our grades for the pass offense, rush offense, pass defense, rush defense, and of course special teams as we continue today's Locked On Falcons podcast. But you guys listen to this podcast for the power of knowledge. You switch to Boost Mobile for the power of saving money, because with Boost, you get the power of a free 5G phone so that you can listen to all the latest episodes of the Locked On Falcons podcast, the power of 3 unlimited data lines for $30 a month per line so your family can harness all that brain power too, and the power of one of America's largest 5G networks so you can do it all at the speed of 5G. With all that money you'll save and all that knowledge you'll gain, just how powerful will you become? Switch to Boost Mobile, find out, get a free Samsung Galaxy A32 5G when you switch to one of America's largest 5G networks. More power to save. Boost Mobile. Free phone limited to new customers and 1 per line. Additional restrictions apply. Offers and coverages not available everywhere for all phones and networks. See boostmobile.com for details. So as we get into the Falcons game grades, starting off with the pass offense as we do. I gave that unit a D plus, and that's not due to Matt Ryan's poor performance. I thought Matt Ryan had his best game to date not to date, but since week 9. We'd said that about last week's performance against Carolina. This week's performance I thought was even better, but unfortunately he just did not get enough help from the rest of the offense, particularly from the offensive line. That was the downfall. Too much pressure for this offense to really function. There were plays where Matt Ryan was seemingly holding on to the ball too long because receivers weren't getting open. He had to evade pressure on all these various things. But, as I have noted several times on the all 22 reviews that we do on Wednesdays, when I've gone back and reviewed the film, some of those times Matt Ryan has held onto the ball, not because receivers weren't getting open, but he was misreading plays or staring down Kyle Pitts. And so we'll basically go back and look at some of those plays at the all 22 when we get to Tuesday and Wednesday to see if we need to draw a different conclusion this time than it was in those previous matchups. But essentially, at least from the television copy, watching the game live, it did look like the coverage, there was a lot of coverage pressure and a lot of coverage sacks. But I think Matt Ryan did his best to try to maneuver around those situations. He was pushing the ball down the field, taking shots, really going after Ambry Thomas on a number of plays. And that paid off to the Falcons in certain ways. They were able to generate a few more big plays than we've grown used to seeing this team on a weekly basis. The Falcons did not really do a great job getting Kyle Pitts involved in the first half. He just had 2 catches on 4 targets for 14 yards. He did have 2 catches in the second half, but they went for 63 yards, including that 49-yard bomb. One wonders if maybe they had put him on Ambry Thomas all game long. They could have feasted on that. But Russell Gage was able to benefit from that, getting a number of big catches against Thomas, finishing with the team high 8 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown. Gage wasn't perfect. There was a couple of drops there, but he seemed to be the only guy contributing outside of that one bomb from Zacchaeus where the safety looked like he blew the coverage. So as far as the protection goes, again, it looked like Jalen Mayfield struggled with another rough outing after a really strong week against Carolina a week ago. Chris Lindstrom looked like he had his 3rd rough game in a row. So we need to do some investigating what's going on with him. All of a sudden, the sudden downturn at the end of the season. And, of course, Caleb McGarry struggled against Nick Bosa. Although you probably could sit here and say it could have been a lot worse. Bosa finished with 1 sack and 1 hit in this game, even though he did miss a big chunk of the game as he was being evaluated for a head injury. So that probably contributed to Bosa. I'm sure he probably ended up with like 5 or 6 pressures in this game because it seemed like he was getting pressure a lot. Just wasn't necessarily finishing on those plays. So 49ers ended up with 3 sacks and 10 hits in this game. A low grade, that D plus is mostly due to the offensive line play. They needed to step up this week. They did not step up. And that contributed to the low grade for the rush offense, which I gave a C minus. The Falcons couldn't get much going on the ground. They finished with a success rate of 37% on 19 design runs. They only converted 2 out of 6 runs on short yardage, meaning 3 yards or less to go. The Falcons, of course, refused to run the quarterback sneak in a number of those situations, even though they've been like 3 for 3 running quarterback sneaks on those short yardage plays this season. But just refused to do it whenever it comes to meaningful snaps, and they just run that toss play, that crack toss every single time. And pitch the ball 6 yards back into the backfield and decide, hey, let's convert a 1-yard gain by throwing the ball 6 yards, making our running back run 6 yards or whatever the case may be. So that's always fun to watch. If you're curious in the direction of their running, they ran the ball 5 times to the left, having a success rate of 60% on those 5 runs. They ran 7 times to the right, 43% success rate, and then 7 times up the middle, where they only were successful 17% of the time. So once again, the Falcons' interior offensive line struggles, although that one conversion the one positive run they had on their 7 runs up the middle was a quarterback sneak. So if you're sitting there saying, hey, that's the reason why they don't do sneaks, it works despite the fact, because all you got to do is get 1 yard. But let's move on to the pass defense. If you can't tell, I'm irritated by that. But pass defense, I give a C minus. They couldn't really stop Kittle. We saw big plays from Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. But due to the 49ers having so much success on the ground, it wasn't as if the passing defense was getting gashed all where, they gave up a bunch of big plays, too many big plays, particularly in the first half of the game. I think they gave up 4 20-plus yard plays in the first half. But on third downs, at least in the first quarter, the pass defense was getting off the field when the 49ers were throwing the ball on third down. 49ers only converted none of their first quarter third down plays when they threw the ball. I think they converted one in the second quarter, and then they had a couple of conversions in the third quarter, basically when they were able to put up most of their points. So it did seem like in the first quarter that the pass defense came to play. Not so much in the second and third quarters when the 49ers scored all their points, pretty much. And, they weren't able to generate much pressure, and there were too many breakdowns with those big plays on the back end. Looked like the 49ers were able to carve up the Falcons' cover two zone, which, again, is related to concerns on the back end, and particularly the safety play, as well as the lack of pressure up front. So pretty typical poor performance for the Falcons pass defense, but I'm not going to necessarily kill them on the grades. Rush defense, I am going to kill them on the grade. They gave them a D minus. We knew that stopping the run was going to be key, and the Falcons failed there. 49ers finished with a 52% success rate on 31 design runs. That number would have been higher if we threw out the fourth quarter when the 49ers were just trying to run out the clock, because their success rate in the fourth quarter alone was just 27%. So through the first three quarters, the 49ers had a success rate of 62%. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with success rate, basically 40% success is running the football is decent. 45% is a healthy success rate. 50% is good. Anything above 50% is great. And basically, when you hear those numbers from me, just double the number and think of it like a passer rating, right? So 62% success rate would be like 124 passer rating. 52% would be like a 104 passer rating. 27% would be like a 54 passer rating. So that tells you sort of where the quality of it is. And so the Falcons gave up 162 yards on the ground. I wouldn't give them an F for this performance, but it was basically as bad as it could get without me giving them an F for the run defense. So that brings us to the special teams, the only unit that showed up today. And we talked about the special teams needing to show up to give this team a chance to make up the ground for the offense and defense. They did their job because I gave them an A. The lone bright spot, Thomas Morstead, once again, brilliant, pinning the 49ers inside the 20 on both of his punts. Younghoe Koo nailed both of his kicks. Avery Williams had his best game to date as a return specialist, had that 23-yard punt late in the game that put the Falcons in positive field position. And then had a pair of kickoff returns that started off the Falcons beyond, I think, the 35 on two separate drives. So the Falcons special teams came to play. You throw in that turnover that they got on the opening kickoff, the coverage units being outstanding and limiting the 49ers there. The only thing that would have earned an A+ for me would have been a blocked punt or a touchdown or something like that. And so with that being the one sliver of thing that could have gotten better, I didn't feel completely comfortable with giving them the A+, so I gave them an A, but it's as good as an A+ performance as you're going to get without having a touchdown, without having a blocked kick in that situation. And probably if the Falcons had scored on that opening drive, I would give them the A+, because I basically give them all the credit for that opening touchdown that they should have had on the Patterson run. And so that's basically it. So, basically I'm officially, it's going in the books as an A, but you guys can consider it an A+ performance as far as I'm concerned. So that's where we'll leave it with the game grades. We'll get into my big question, talking about the Falcons' failures to show up in a playoff implicating game. And what does that tell us about the Arthur Smith era in year one? We'll get into that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. But before we do, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. And of course, Locked On Falcons is free and available on a variety of podcast platforms. And it's also free and available on a variety of podcast platforms. That's the Locked On Braves podcast, the Locked On Hawks podcast, or the Locked On Bulldogs podcast, if you're into those sort of things. Of course, Locked On Podcast Network has you covered on a variety of sports: hockey, basketball, baseball, college sports, etc. You can find them all on Apple, Odyssey, Google, Spotify, and of course, Locked On Braves and Locked On Bulldogs are also free and available on YouTube as well. So, guys, it's the holiday season. Why not grab a protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar, if not even better than a candy bar? And if you don't know what I'm talking about Built Bars, the best tasting protein bar on the market. They're rich with decadent flavor. They're covered in chocolate, but they're healthy too. Low in sugar, carbs, calories, and fat, but high in protein and fiber. You get the best of both worlds, both delicious and healthy. You can try limited time flavors like ruby chocolate, lemon chip cheesecake, gingerbread, eggnog, caramel macchiato, coconut brownie, or you can go for your old favorites like peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, and cookies and cream. Built Bar is great to give you that extra fuel as you get into the last couple of days before you finish up your holiday shopping, so you can endure those endless shopping lines. Make sure you pack a Built Bar as you're waiting in line by heading over to built.com. Order yourself some today, and make sure when you do, use the promo code LOCKED15 and you'll get 15% off your first order. Again, that's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. So I told you guys I thought the Falcons would cover in this 9-point spread to the 49ers, and of course they did not. So I hoped you did the opposite of what I say when it comes to talking about the Falcons' ability to cover, as has been the case all season long. You guys can make so much more money if you do the opposite of what I say, but you can only do so by heading over to BetOnline and their new updated website at betonline.ag and sign up. And when you do, make sure you use the promo code Locked On, and you'll get a 50% welcome bonus, which means if you deposit $200, you get $100 in free money to play with. That's $100 that you could be using to take advantage of the Falcons' ineptitude at BetOnline. Or you can bet on other sports like NBA, NHL, boxing, UFC, all the way to your favorite Vegas casino games, because of course BetOnline is the #1 spot for all the sports betting action that you need this season. So don't wait and take advantage of all the amazing offers available at BetOnline, where the game starts. So the Falcons are unofficially out of the playoff picture, but we're not going to talk about the playoffs anymore for the rest of the season. 538 puts their playoff chances as of kickoff for the Sunday night game at 2%. The New York Times puts them at 2%. I think Football Outsiders had them at 2% going into the weekend. So I'm sure when they update their website, it'll be like 0.1% or something like that. And it's been below 1% for most of the season. So they've never really given us much of a shot, despite the fact that, five websites like 538 could have said that the Falcons would have gone up to like over 40% with a win today. So as I said, going into the game, I was trying not to overly read too much into this performance as like the embodiment of year one of Arthur Smith era. But it certainly was a disappointing performance, and the Falcons look like they struggle with the same old issues that they have been bothered by all season long. And so it's really hard to buy into the notion, especially today, that this team is markedly better than they were at the beginning of the season. We saw their struggles in short yardage running the football. We saw the poor offensive line play. We saw the inconsistency in the passing game. We saw the defense getting gashed by big plays, their inability to pressure the quarterback, their inability to stop the run. The only thing that's really improved from like week one to now is the special teams. And that's basically because the Falcons finally got off their butt and signed Thomas Morstead, which they should have done at the beginning of the season, before the season even started, if you want to go there. And Avery Williams finally is starting to look like the highly touted return specialist that he was, built up to be coming out of Boise State today of all days. So kudos to the special teams for stepping up. Marquise Williams, you got a lot of anger from me earlier in the season when the team was constantly bringing Elliott Fry back. I think Elliott Fry finally signed with the team. It was the Chiefs or somebody this week, and it seemed like once the Falcons stopped messing with Elliott Fry, all of a sudden their special teams finally came together. That's the story I'm sticking to moving forward. So there isn't much else to add in terms of this game. We'll see if the Falcons can improve in some of those areas that we're talking about not improving over these final 3 games of the season. But of course, it's going to be too little too late at that point in time. So we'll see what the Falcons do, particularly against the tougher competition they face against the Bills and Saints, to see if they can step up in some of these areas. Although, I don't want to necessarily dismiss the Lions, as I have done for most of this season, because they're coming off a big win against the Cardinals. And so that game does not look like as easy a win as it appeared to be for the last 3 months. But of course, it was never going to be an easy win, because the Falcons would, of course, come out, get an early lead, blow it in the fourth quarter, and then finally get a score or a stop that they need to win the game in the end, as they have won every single one of their games against lesser opponents this year. So even if it was a easy win, it wasn't going to be easy, because it was going to go down to the final, 3 minutes of the game, because that's just the Falcons being the Falcons. That's their formula in terms of this year, in terms of wins. So we'll see if the Lions can, wreck that formula, or whatever the case may be. All season long, basically, I've been saying, like, when the Falcons play well on Sunday, I'm like, oh, this team might actually win 8 games this year. Or when the Falcons don't play well, I'm like, oh, well, they're going to only win up 7. But now that's in jeopardy, because the Lions are surging. So we'll see how the Lions respond to their best game of the season so far this year. I won't say that this was the worst game of the season for the Falcons, because I think you can certainly make a case that the Cowboys game or the Eagles game were much worse performances objectively. But given the importance of today's game, you can certainly make a case that this was the most disappointing performance of the Falcons so far this year. Their red zone struggles today now put their conversion rate at basically the same number as they were a year ago under Dirk Cutter. So, we can't even sit here and say, well, at least Arthur Smith's got the team better in the red zone. And technically they're worse right now because last year they converted 53.4% of their red zone tries, and this year they're currently at 53.3%. So technically they've downgraded in that department. We'll see again how they perform over these last 3 games to see if they can elevate that number. But essentially going into this game with the low expectations, having them raised in those first few minutes of the game, and then seeing it all fall apart was just not a fun ride on the roller coaster. So we'll just sort of have to see how it goes for the Falcons the rest of the season. That's where we're going to leave it, guys. We'll have Dave Choke come on the podcast tomorrow to give his thoughts. Dave usually comes on the podcast when we need to be talked off a ledge. So it's timely for Dave to come on the podcast and see if he maybe has a little bit more of a positive spin on things. We'll see how that goes. Of course, it was a kiss of death when I reached out to Dave on Sunday before the game to see if he wanted to come on the show. And, no one can come on the show after a win, pretty much. Any of the regulars always come on after losses, but I don't blame that on the regulars. I blame that on the Falcons, as you guys should do. All right, guys, there you have it. We'll leave it there here for Locked On Falcons, and you guys should not leave it in terms of what you should check out for your second listen. I know that was a mouthful of me to say, but just to get you to another plug of the Locked On Bets podcast, where if you want to make some money and not be as miserable as I am this season watching this Falcons team, at least you can make some money on the side getting those betting recommendations from Lee Sterling, the handicapping expert out of Paramount Sports. And Lee's, of course, giving you those blowout specials, those locks of the day. And you can check out Locked On Bets on a variety of podcast platforms. So, guys, that's what's going to do it here for us on Locked On Falcons. We'll see what Dave has to say. We'll see what the film has to say later this week. And then we'll see what Locked On Lions has to say about this resurgent Lions team on Thursday. And then, of course, on Friday, we'll do something, I don't know, to give you an early Christmas Eve present or whatever the case may be. But that's the week of Locked On Falcons for you. I appreciate you guys for tuning in for another episode. If you want to provide feedback on anything I've talked about today, anything you want me to talk about later this week, or anything I've talked about in previous episodes, of course, you can hit me up on Twitter at Locked On Falcons, on Facebook at Locked On Falcons. You can send an email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com, or, of course, you can leave a comment on the new improved Locked On Falcons YouTube page. So there you guys have it. I hope you find some joy in your life outside of Atlanta Falcons football. I know I will try my best to do so on this joyous of occasions of this holiday season this week. So we'll see what we can do. But guys, appreciate it. Until then.